are here and have taken the time on your Friday morning to be with us. We really look forward to these Friday mornings, and I am appreciative of your time as well. This morning we are talking about, let me get my screen here all set. This morning we're talking about equipping families for virtual learning and what that means. For those of you who don't know, we're the Diverse Learners Cooperative. I have me and my colleagues Mary and Josh also on the line. And we are a nonprofit organization with a mission of connecting teachers and leaders to professional learning networks and resources that further best practice for diverse learners. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. Our mission this morning is to identify strategies we can use to equip families as home learning facilitators that are inclusive of our diverse learners. We'll talk first about the why, then what is needed, and then how do we deliver on those promises to ensure that students have access to learning. So we know that families are a big part of our students' success in school. We know that when we engage families, students attend school more often, they get better grades, they have more positive behaviors, they have stronger relationships with their peers, with their teachers, and with their families. And now we have undergone a huge setting change, right, for the last few months of going from school learning to home learning, still facilitated by the school, but now also very much so in the hands of our students and families at home. So how do we adjust for that, and what do we need to know in order to equip our families? Our families are now in the seat of a learning facilitator, and that takes on a lot of different roles. It could be caring for their child just in general. They have to do that anyway, but now they are doing it all day. And what does that look like? They are interventionists. They are advocates for our students. They're making decisions about learning that they have not had to make before. They are encouragers. They are finding solutions that will work for their child. They are co-teachers in some matter of way now, in a new way. And of course, the big one that's weighed heavy on all of our hearts and minds lately is as technical support. And how do we get students on and learning in the best ways possible? And families are a huge part of that. So knowing that they're learning facilitators at home, what do they need to know and be able to do that they haven't had to do before? Some of those things are to prepare a space for learning. That's actually the physical space of it, but also setting a schedule for the day. What does it look like? Our teachers of course, are helping parents do that, but parents are helping manage that schedule at home. They're helping organize all of this information and need to know how to do that well. In one of the Facebook groups that I was part of, a parent commented that how on a Sunday night they had received 12 emails from the school in some form or fashion. And just thinking about all of the information that is coming to our families, how to organize that, how to make sure students have the right logins to the right place, but then also show up at the right time and are getting the assignments completed, the ones that you want them to, right? And so how do we help them and equip them to organize that information and then support technology access as well? In the center column here, we need to find ways to equip families to support their children on all fronts, the whole child, whether it's emotional support and check-ins, behavioral support, organizational, like executive functioning skills, how do they organize themselves? And then, of course, academic support. But really, the emotional, behavioral, and organizational support will lead to better academic support, and hopefully take that a little off the family if we can get all of these other pieces in place first. And then extending. So what about learning? I might be frozen. Here we go. What about learning outside of what the teacher is directly providing? Are there ways to extend learning opportunities? on or off the screen, right? Really important to talk about off-screen time and what does that look like. We need to collaborate with the team. So families need to have access to the team to ask questions, get questions answered. And then families reflect on, is this working? Right now, I can speak as a mom of 3 myself, like it feels like I don't have a moment to think of, is this working? What do I need to adjust? And so can we provide space for families to learn those skills of reflection or apply those skills of reflection and be able to adjust in partnership with the school to better suit their needs? So they need to know all of these things, right? They need to practice all of these things in some way. How do we do that? So here are some ideas about that. One is that we communicate. We have to have open lines of communication, two-way communication, right? From them to us, from us to them. And what does that look like? We've talked about this in a prior coffee chat, so I would refer you back to another coffee chat around how to increase the quality of communications with families. But we need to remember early and often that we are communicating with them. And then asking the right questions. So instead of asking, how are things going? You could ask very specifically about their behavior or about how they're organizing things, or what do you need help with? Here are some ideas, and then open up a conversation that way. And of course, in all of these communications, we need to empathize with the family's experience. Nobody has done this before. We are all learning. So how can we communicate in a way that demonstrates huge amounts of empathy for where the family is, both in the context of COVID-19, a global health pandemic, and in the context of we're doing virtual learning, and now you're helping us do that in a way that you haven't needed to before. The second is to gather, right? Either gather information through check-ins and surveys with your families, or gather them actually to a place to learn together. So I would encourage you to go where they are. They are likely not on Teams. And it's less accessible for them, right? So think about, like, is there a Facebook group or Facebook Live or YouTube where they're already at, using applications like this where you can go to them and then direct them to Teams, or direct them where you might have more information for them. But that's probably not your first go-to. It is overwhelming to click through the number of buttons just to get into a meeting like that. So, that's communication with empathy, is to realize that that may not be the first best place. And then you could host virtual parent universities or town halls or Q&A sessions. These aren't sessions where you sit and get information and hope they've got it, right? It is a way to open up the conversation with families so that it can, one, lead with empathy, and two, actually provide a space where they can ask and answer questions as well. The third is to provide access then to the right resources. So those could be recorded videos that maybe it's a tech tutorial and you actually share your screen and show them how to click here and there. And maybe it's a resource list of additional learning opportunities that the family or the student could engage in. It could be a template for organizing login information, right? So that they have all of the login information for their child in one place. But when we provide access to the right resource that they need right then at the right time. And so not to overwhelm. I think I can speak for us all. We've been overwhelmed by a number of Google Docs that have all the listing of all the resources you could possibly use. And I just X those out. I can't handle it. It's too much. And so our parents feel the same way, I'm sure. And so, providing the right resource at the right time is really important. So in that regard, the DLC has been working on it says add URL because I forgot. Mary, can you put the URL in the chat box? We've been working on a toolkit specifically for families or other learning facilitators. So we know that families are not the only ones coordinating learning for their children, whether it's a child care worker or the local gymnastics gym that's offering virtual learning camp, or the YMCA who's supporting with virtual learning, or a tutor or a nanny or whomever is providing learning support. They're going to need access to resources to help them do this well. So we have been working on a virtual learning toolkit specifically designed for them. I'm going to give you a little peek into it, but the video is on our website and it's just 1 minute, and I'd encourage you to check that out. As far as suggested uses for this toolkit, there's a couple ways to do it. It does have a lot of resources, but they're organized in a way that you can click to the thing that you need. One is that a school could offer it to their whole community and say, here's a resource that you could use to set up your space in your home for this. Two is that you could use it specifically for diverse learners, because of course, as the Diverse Learners Cooperative, we took a diverse learners lens to it, and you can target a specific group of students to work it through with them. So maybe as a case manager or as a SIFE teacher, or whomever, whatever your role is, you would work with a small group of families through a particular section of the toolkit to help them out. Or you could use it as an individualized support. So let's say that you have a student who is struggling with behavior at home, and you want to be able to help that parent identify better strategies for behavior. You might point them specifically to the chapter around behavior and say, here's some resources for that. Take this at your own pace. Here, there's a checklist in there about how to stay calm, and that may be really useful to you. So we'll check back in a couple of days and see how that's going for you and your child. So that would be one example of how to use this as an individualized support. Another example would be another individualized support option would be to think about academic support. So the toolkit has sections on reading, writing, and math, and there are strategies in there that specifically designed that a non-teacher could implement. And so they could use this as a resource as well, and you could point them to something there. So when we think about this, usually the teacher is supporting the child, the family is supporting the child. We have some communication, right, back and forth between the teacher and family, but that has really got to be strengthened in our current season and what we're doing. And so we know that if we do that, the benefits that we talked about at the beginning are going to be the same now, right? If we engage parents, students are more likely to log into our calls. If we and engage in learning and attend school, they're likely to have a more positive attitude towards school, earn better grades, have better relationships. The benefits don't change, the modes and methods in which we're delivering learning and then also communicating with families do. And as a final reminder, we're all in this together. As I said, nobody has done this before. Nobody has taught in a global pandemic in this sort of way, certainly not with computers, which has added a whole nother element to this, right? And so to remember that parents and teachers and students and school teams are all in this together. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to do virtual co-teaching. We're going to take next week off because it's the Friday before Labor Day. But we would love to engage you in a conversation about what does co-teaching look like in the virtual setting on September 11th. And now would love to hear any thoughts you have around or questions around equipping families. And yeah, we'll take it from there.
So one thing that's been healthy for me, so hello, I'm Ryan Savaggio. I'm a SIFE teacher in a high school setting up at Hunters Lane High School. Yay, go Warriors. And so I realized kind of adding to so many of the amazing resources, and I'm excited to jump back in the toolkit and see that. So on a high school schedules are like really interesting because every single day looks very different. Like my high school, we do a 4x4, which means that these certain students will have Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, but then you have an AB schedule as well as 4x4 classes. Some students may have four, some students may have five. It's just very confusing even for teachers to kind of figure it out. And so what I did is I created a template for, there's just a very simple template that has just different classes on PowerPoint. And so when I have a new student, I've actually just created this template so I can just input their teacher's name, the time, a little image that shows what that teacher and also that class is. And then I send it typically on WhatsApp and then also in an email to the families as well as the student. And then reference that back. And then especially for the first like week or so, I've been checking in with each of the students like, hey, it's 8 o'clock. Are you at this class? Hey, it's 9 o'clock. Are you at this class? And I was thinking to like also put like the Teams link in there too, but then that loses the chance for them to go on to Schoology and to do the Teams link from there. So I was like, but it was really helpful just because I also was able to easily go into Infinite Campus and then really think about, well, if it's an A schedule, that means that their classes are going to be Monday, Thursday at Hunter's Lane, and kind of like figure out for myself so that they don't have to do that figuring out too. And it's been super helpful. And the template just really simple. It's not super pretty, but it works. And so that's just been something that's been really helpful for me, especially in a high school end, and especially for English learners and their families, has been thinking through actually getting them to class and that expectation of, hey, these days you need to be here at a certain time for your synchronous classes. And then the other times, you just need to make sure you do your work at some point during the day.
That
Yeah,
sounds great. I think
yeah,
that really promotes the accessibility of the education piece too. You know, been talking a lot about equity and accessibility in this virtual world. And so I'm sure that your students and families really appreciate just that breakdown of all of that information that would confuse us who have knowledge in a school running system, right? And how that typically works in the building. And so I'm sure that they really appreciate that accessibility, and that will definitely increase your student outcomes too.
any other thoughts or questions about equipping families?
I
All
just
right.
have a question for Ryan real quick, bro.
Yeah.
Um, once they have your schedule, like how are your students keeping track of that? I mean, I know they have the template, but is it in a calendar? Are they transferred into some sort of calendar function or some way they're getting those triggers and reminders?
That's a great question, and that's a great suggestion. So right now, typically my students, we're getting them, especially the SIFE students in particular, just getting them into Outlook and Calendar is a step that we're trying to in the next month or so. And so typically at first, what we've done is just take that image and then send it to them in an email for their families if they prefer, but on WhatsApp. And really, it's just checking in and saying, hey, so what's nice about the SIFE students in particular is like, I know three of their four student our teachers every day, which I'm really grateful for. And it's just a great program that we have, kind of like the sheltered classroom. And so I'm able to check in with those teachers and say, hey, how are they doing? Hey, how are they doing? More on the teacher end, and then on the student end, be like, hey, it's your asynchronous day. You know, it's 2 o'clock. Have you done your, have you done your work yet? So it's less of a like, prompting on like a calendar invite. That's definitely something to be really cool at some point to do. But it's more been me checking in, and then once I see them doing it for 2, 3, 4 days in a row, like them getting to class, doing all the work on time, I kind of just like let them go. And then every week or so, I'll check in with their teachers just saying, hey, how's the student doing? Um, and so that's a really good idea, though, especially as we kind of onboard Outlook and calendars is something we hadn't even thought about yet, like thinking about how to add them to some of those things. But it's kind of a mixture of, hey, we're releasing control, like, hey, this is also your responsibility as a high school student to
Yeah,
do this, and this is part of your expectation. And so kind of like surrounding them with those opportunities for them to be responsible, but also like for teachers and me to also check in on them too.
cool.
Really great
Well,
question.
thank you. Appreciate it.
We are going to wrap up for today. We appreciate you spending the morning with us and asking such thoughtful questions and sharing what is working for you. Again, that is what helps us do this all together, even though we are not physically together in schools this fall. So we are excited to see you again in a couple of weeks, and we will send out the slide deck with the link to resources as well. If you have any questions, feel free to email anybody on the team, and check out our website for more tools and resources. Have a great Friday, everyone.